It's been an interesting couple of years since the start of COVID back at early 2020. I think what we've seen over the past 2 years is a real shift away from traditional forms of engagement, traditional forms of communication, towards much more digital first, and I would say a more widespread adoption of digital channels as the preference, the way that people access, consume information, but also the way that they make decisions. That's much bigger than government, but the impact that has then had on government, as far as government communications goes, is there's been a need to rapidly change or rapidly accelerate the use of these digital channels as forms of communication and engagement in order to keep pace with the expectations of citizens. And why that's important is because when you look at, if you step back and look at digital, what it provides you is real-time access, responsiveness, attributes that you couldn't otherwise get from physical channels. The accessibility of digital now means that people at any time, anywhere can plug in and hear what you're saying or what you think or what your advice is. And we saw that through COVID in terms of health messages and getting those messages to people in a timely manner. But I think the big opportunity that's come out of it over the past 2 years is this shift away from brand or agency-led communications and much more towards individuals. People now have, in the ways that their habits and their behaviors have changed, people are now much more receptive to hearing from individual leaders, what those who are driving public policy, whether on the political side or the bureaucratic side, people who are having those conversations. They're interested to know what they believe in, what they stand for, why they share those views, and whether they align with the way that people think. So it's much more about connecting with humans through digital channels than it is about connecting with brands or entities online. When you look back at early COVID, those who had the infrastructure in place, those who had the mindset, those who had the capability to harness this digital world when all of a sudden the physical world was shut off to them, those were the agencies that thrived. Those were the people who thrived. And those were the ones who were better placed to suddenly say, well, hang on a minute. We've already been doing this thing almost as BAU through our agency, through our entity infrastructure. What if we started to transition or complement some of that through to our individuals? Because if you think of your own behavior, all of us in those early stages, we suddenly had to adapt to new ways of working. So those agencies that were well set up to adapt and address, or at least meet the needs of that new consumer behavior, were those who thrived. And those who weren't prepared, and those who suddenly had to catch up while there was all this chaos happening around them with COVID in terms of the disruptions that caused and has continued to cause over 2 years, those that weren't prepared are the ones who then suffered. I think aligned with a lot of the trends that we've been talking about and the need across the public sector is, how can we build confidence and capability? How can we ensure that our people, literally from top to bottom, feel comfortable in this new digital environment that most people were thrust into? So what we've been doing is working closely with agencies to help them recognize this is a wonderful opportunity. Because we are now all connected through digital platforms, rather than being something to be fearful of and run and hide from, it's actually an opportunity to access greater numbers of people, wider communities beyond those that you might otherwise interact with in a physical environment. And what that means is you've got greater ability to access insight and knowledge when you know where to look, when we can use platforms like LinkedIn, like Twitter, like Facebook as sources of information and insight. They can be a pulse of a nation, essentially, real-time feedback on people's views and attitudes. And that's very powerful, right down to the individual decision maker within a government agency to have access to that. So we've been helping build that capability around listening and learning from public social media conversations. And we feel it's really important to continue building the capability in the public sector that allows it and its people, its public servants, to connect on a regular and ongoing basis and in a meaningful, purposeful way with citizens in order to restore and rebuild that trust. And so in November 2019, we brought a group of progressive public servants together to share ideas and to share experiences across jurisdictions and across the country, to learn from one another. Well, what are you going through right now in your agency? What things have you come up against? How have you overcome those barriers? And what shared learnings can we discuss as a group to ensure that the collective intelligence of that group and ideally the sector at large goes up. And so the plan here is to try and address some of the real pressing and practical issues that different government agencies are facing within the sphere of digital communications and social media. The public sector is uniquely positioned to share learnings, to share insights, to share experiences. That means that we're not having to have the same difficult learnings over and over again as a public sector. Instead, what we can do is learn from the experiences of others and ideally accelerate that capability, accelerate our effective use of digital communication channels.